My name is Scott Sweigart, and my wife Heather Sweigart is about to undergo a small intestine transplant. So we're here working with the folks from B&A, working with friends and family to help coordinate this fundraising event. We have an 11-year-old daughter, Olivia, where our family is really in need at this point. We've been going through this struggle for the last 3+ years. And the next leg of our journey is going to take us out to Cleveland for about 12 to 18 months to get through this next part of the process. On March 20th, 2012, my wife Heather Sweigart suffered a perforation in her transverse colon. And what that means is there was a hole where she ended up leaking out 3 liters of stool into her abdominal cavity. She went into complete septic shock, and they took her to the operating room, and that day they were only able to clean out what had poured out inside of her. That was the first time where I heard the phrase, "You need to be prepared for anything." They took her back to the operating room the next day, where they discovered the underlying obstruction as well as the outer wall of her large intestine at that point that was ready to rupture. So they ended up removing 75% of her large intestine that day. Over the course of the next 3 months, she went back to the operating room several times for what are called stoma revisions. She ended up with an ileostomy at that point, which means there was a wound bag and there was a stoma where stool was secreted into the bag. During most of that time, she was on a ventilator in ICU. And as she finally started to heal, she got to a point where her wounds weren't healing the way they were supposed to. So her surgeon, Dr. Creary, mentioned that he thought maybe a second opinion wouldn't be out of the question. And he mentioned the opportunity about going to Johns Hopkins. We gave some thought to that, and on the day that we said, let's do it, that was May 25th, 2012. At 2 in the morning, my wife aspirated and ended up back on a ventilator, again in septic shock, fighting for her life. They flew her via air ambulance, for basically a lifeline, down to Johns Hopkins, where she spent 6 months trying to work her way back through that. In that time, she was back in the operating room for several different issues. One of which was where they placed a filter in her groin to prevent the blood clots that were in both legs from breaking free and ultimately either going to her lungs, her heart, or her brain. She developed a severe contracture in her right ankle due to being in ICU in a bed for so long. We ultimately got that repaired via a tendon release surgery, so she's able to walk correctly now. Excuse me. Beyond that, my wife started to develop something called an enterocutaneous fistula. And the simple answer is, if you can imagine a garden hose that's hooked up to a house and the other end is hooked up to a faucet or a nozzle. And if you have water running through there, but it doesn't come out if you don't open that nozzle, everything's contained. A fistula is basically when you put a pinhole somewhere in the center of that hose, and now stool is once again coming out where it shouldn't be. She went back to the operating room at Johns Hopkins to have it repaired, only to have the surgeon say, I couldn't even tell where to begin. So now we'll have her go home, and in 6 months we'll try and repair this again. That didn't seem like a viable option for us, and fortunately we ended up being able to go out and be evaluated at the Cleveland Clinic, where in February of 2015 they ended up removing all but the last 6 inches of her small intestine. So she now has what's called a jejunostomy, where she puts out anywhere from 3.5 to 4.5 liters of stool a day. Some pretty severe complications that arise from that are going into severe dehydration, which could lead to a heart attack stroke, or death. So there are some things we do to try to combat that. She receives IV nutrition every night. I administer that as well as her IV steroids. She's been on steroid therapy for so long that she's developed osteoporosis. And due to the osteoporosis, she gets compression fractures in her spine. She doesn't even have to fall to get this. Sometimes she wakes up with them. So she's been to the operating room for what's called a kyphoplasty procedure, where they inject cement in her back to try and stabilize the fracture. My wife's been through quite a bit over the last 3 years. And even through every setback, even through every negative implication of some type of surgery, she keeps coming back and she's not giving up. And I'm asking everybody that gets involved to help us to not give up on us either, because Heather never did. So if you'd like to help us out, you can reach us one of several ways. You can call me or text me on my cell phone, which is area code 717-614-0466. You can go on my Facebook page, which is Scotty Sweigart. You can go on our Team Heather page on Facebook, or you can reach out to us at lessthanappreciative.org. We hope to see everybody at our kickoff event at ABC East Bowling Lanes on Saturday, June 27th from 2 to 5. We're going to have a blast. But again, we're going to party with a purpose. We're going to sign people up to help us sell raffle tickets. We're going to have silent auction items available. We'll have t-shirts. We'll have fun. We'll have games. We'll have prizes. We'll get a little bowling in. But we're not going to lose sight of why we're all there. Thank you.